to do a little bit of introductions first. So in regards to who I am, my name is Debbie Taras. I am the principal, the youth work specialist for the National Youth Agency. I have well over 25 years of being a youth worker in the UK, and I've been working for the National Youth Agency for 24 months. I'd like to pass you across to my colleague Pete Crossley.
Hi, I'm Pete Crossley. I am a newbie to the National Youth Agency. I've just recently left the University of Cumbria, where I was a senior lecturer teaching the undergraduate and postgraduate degrees in youth and community work. And prior to that, I had 20 years, so I spent it in prison, but I was working with the YMCA as a youth work practitioner, and we work with young offenders in prison. So I did spend quite a bit of time behind the wire, as they say.
Thanks very much for that, Pete. So just a bit of Zoom housekeeping for those of you who may not be familiar with Zoom. This will actually be recorded, so just for you to be aware of that. I would also like to just mention to everybody that you are all on mute. We can't unmute you, but if you do want to ask any questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat that we have, and what we will do is we will look at them when we have some breakout rooms, and then we'll be able to obviously answer some of those questions for you. Could I just please check that you do actually have it all on mute, because sometimes we do get a bit of feedback, and if those of you who have earpieces in it, it sometimes may just affect you, the hearing. In regards to how we're going to do this today, it will be in the form of a PowerPoint presentation, but because we're all youth workers, it wouldn't be the same if we didn't do a little bit of interaction and having some breakout rooms. So we will be asking you to work a little bit today, but to also to get to know each other. So you will be going into breakout rooms, and that may be with people who you know, but it also may be with people who you don't know. So it'll be a really great opportunity for you to get to know people. So again, just please check your screens. We will guide you on that, but you will be taken into breakout rooms to be able to have other conversations. So if that's okay and everybody's all right, then we can actually start. So in terms of this this very first presentation that we're going to give you, it is just over an hour long, and in this session what we're hoping that you will obviously learn from this is to be able to explore some of the theories which actually underpin leadership and management. And we're really going to unpick some of those theories and unpick some of that what we class as discourse, and some of those narratives around actually what is leadership, what is management, and some of those theoretical aspects that underpin some of that thinking. Second thing that we're going to look at is actually looking at examining the difference between management and leadership. Lane obviously mentioned that within his presentation to you all about the future and about the vision of how we want to move forward, and certainly within the Commonwealth. But actually, what does that mean to us as youth workers? And in particular, and probably most important, what does that mean in terms of the services that we're providing, as well as the young people that we work alongside? We mentioned obviously about looking at the future in terms of a theory of change for the Commonwealth, was certainly looking at young leadership and young leaders. But what does that actually mean, and where do we place ourselves really as youth workers, and how can we be part of that? And the third thing that we want to do is we wouldn't be youth workers if we didn't reflect. Some of us are very good at reflection. Some of us perhaps just need that little bit of coaching to be able to support that. And again, Lane mentioned that within his opening speech and his presentation, and he talked about how perhaps in terms of supervisions, certainly in England we have things that we call non-clinical and clinical supervisions, and that's an opportunity for us as youth workers to be able to sit back and reflect on our practice, but also for us to be able to actually reflect on how our organisation develops. And it's really key when we're looking at both management and leadership in terms of actually how do we reflect on that, and how can our organisation develop and grow managers and leaders, and certainly within a youth work environment. Really interested to hear that you have some similarities to what we have certainly in England around that, what people perceive as youth workers. And for us, is our role actually taken seriously? You know, or while in England, for you to be a qualified youth worker, you have to have your BE Honours degree. And even if we have that, and we have that the same as our colleagues as a teacher, sometimes people don't still see youth workers actually as that academic professional occupation. And it certainly is. And it's really important as well that we actually then can then, you know, transition that into actually how we're trying to get more and more young people within this profession as well. Certainly from England, we are really pushing that in terms of careers advice, that youth work is seen as a real career. And it's something that, you know, a lot of young people can actually move into, get a professional qualification, and then be able to go right across all different sorts of aspects of work to be able to work with young people. So we're going to try and unpick that today and give you some questions to take back with you, take back within your workplace, and just start to perhaps unpick that more and look at that from a reflective practice. Okay, Pete, over to you.
If we have the next slide, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
If you were studying your BA honours in England, you'd be looking at management and leadership from the second year. So we kind of jumped right into some of the more difficult concepts in youth work. Every student that I have actually taught would say, I don't want to be a manager, because they want to sort of retain their values and ethics. They want to stay as face-to-face practitioners. But really, there's something quite sort of management is seen as a bit of a dirty word sometimes, really. And I suppose what we're trying to do is explore management and leadership over the next hour, really. But it would suggest that the term management and leadership within the context of youth work is kind of in dispute. If you look at the history of the youth service, so, you know, we didn't always have managers. We had the role of supervisors and more experienced workers, but it's quite a modern concept. As this chap John Ord, he's an associate professor at Plymouth University on their postgraduate youth work course, and he talks a lot about the danger of managerialism. And it's value laden in a profession that kind of would say we are very egalitarian. We're about empowering young people. Young people need to participate in their lives. Seems to go in the face of the stereotypical view of a hierarchical management system. You do the next slide, Debs. So really, there's we're not particularly suggesting that there's things to manage and things to lead, but really. The research and the language, and certainly a lot of the discourse around management in youth work tends to lend itself to, rather than talk about management, we talk about leadership. We talk about leadership styles. We talk about having different leadership approaches. So really, during the next hour, we're going to be sort of shifting really between what needs managing, does anything lead managing. If you were in an academic ivory tower, we could explore that for a while, or what needs leading. And often youth workers would kind of put it in the context of things that need managing, things like your finances, the building, maybe the accounts and things like that. But when you're talking about working with people, we often talk about leadership and leadership styles instead. Next slide. And again, John Ord talks about this chap, Bernard Brass, who writes a lot again about sort of leadership and management, and raises the question around, do we really need it? And it's an interesting figure, and it's an old statistic. It's gone up greatly now. 36 to 60 billion is spent annually on management and leadership, with very little evaluating it. So again, increasingly people are put on management courses, and there's lots of different programs and different sort of management modules, and a whole host of businesses have been created to train people to effectively look at their impact. And those wonderful words of we have to demonstrate our effectiveness. It's kind of the language of quite a business-driven management style. And I suppose really what we want to move on to now is looking at management and leadership within the profession of youth and community work. What does it actually mean to us?
Okay, so what we're now going to do is we're now going to pass this across to you guys to go out into breakout rooms and some discussions. And what we're going to ask you within your group is, first of all, could you please, I dare say, volunteer, or somebody may volunteer to do this, to be your spokesperson when we come back. but you have 10 minutes within your breakout rooms to look at two key questions really. One, what does leadership mean to you? Now, when we say this, we actually say, what does that mean to you perhaps as a youth worker or as an individual, and perhaps maybe as to your organisation? And then think about, well, then what does management mean to you? Because these are two concepts that we're trying to unpick within this actual particular session. So what we'd like you to do is to have some of those discussions, and it will be really interesting to see if people have similar views, if there's some synergy, or perhaps people have maybe some conflicting views, and that's absolutely fine, because as professionals and as youth workers, you know, we're used to having those conversations and being able to really think about and reflect on actually what other people's thoughts are. So we'd like you to go away and think about, what does leadership mean to you? What does management lead to you? Come up with an agreed sort of statement to describe each one. We're not expecting an essay or anything, but we just want to just a brief discussion, and then what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll ask your spokesperson just to be able to feed that back to us, and we'll have about 10 minutes discussion as a group. David, because you're first on you're in the corner as such in my screen. Sorry to kind of like to jump on you as such, but would you kindly be able to feed back just maybe perhaps what did leadership mean to your group? That would be great. I appreciate it.
Well, no problem.
Thank you.
I think our group was totally connected somehow, because most of the things we were talking about, each of us talked about, we had different a lot of commonalities with it. So let me see if I could put everything into one content. We look at leadership first, and then we start to look at management.
Okay.
And I'm not a big writer, okay? So I kind of put everything together and say that.
That's fine. That's fine.
Management is more of controlling a whole group to accomplish a particular goal, okay?
Yeah.
And management has some leadership qualities also, but management is more focused then on controlling a whole group to make sure they reach the particular goal. And real leadership then has the ability then to influence both individuals and to motivate them also set examples to accomplish to contribute towards a particular the success of the organization or the person itself. That's
Great.
what we're looking at.
Thank
I
you.
hope I actually put everything together as the group, you know what I mean? So
I am sure your group will give you a thumbs up, definitely, for that. So I really do appreciate you going first. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Monique, because you're next, you're just sat right next to David. Were you a spokesperson for your group? I think you need to unmute, Monique. I'm not allowed to unmute you.
Sorry.
No, you're right.
My group member, my good colleague, Mr. Hector, he's the representative for our group.
Okay. Thank you.
So Hector, you can come in at this point.
That's what I like to hear. Thank you, Monique.
You're welcome, Deborah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Hector.
Could I just interrupt quickly? Sorry. If the people who were spokespersons for their group could just type something say I'm the spokesperson in the chat.
Thank you, Stephen. That's great.
All right, so yeah, we had quite an interesting discussion on both. Before I begin to differentiate, I would just say as well that we agreed as a group that we need both management and leadership, and they both need interpersonal skills, right? Now, as far as leadership, some keywords came out. We will not give a definition, but I'll just highlight some keywords that came out of our discussion. So we spoke of things like mentorship, leadership being influencing change, motivating group members or team members to a shared vision. And I think overall, there's a keyword that we came up with. So leadership is really about transformation. That word was quite common among the discussion. And then secondly, as it relates to management, we saw management as more of a transactional resource management function, where it was really about how do we use the resources within the organization to accomplish the goals of the organization.
Great. Thank you. So you're getting a
Right,
thumbs up
it's
from
justice.
Monique as well. I think you did good there. Thank you so much for that, Hector. Next, do I have, is it Hugh Williams, or is
Yes,
it the other way around? Is it William?
yes, it's
Hugh?
Hugh Williams.
Hi,
Yes.
Hugh. Great to
Hello.
hear you. Hi there.
All right. In our group, there was a big question at first, well, specifically to leadership in terms of context. Is it you being led as a youth worker, or you as a youth worker taking the lead? So that question came up first. But basically, we came up, and I'm going to summarize most of the things that were said. Leadership basically is giving assistance, giving directive, taking the lead as it is necessary, seen based on who's needing that leadership to influence and impact change, positive change in the direction in which you want it to go, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to management, I would almost say that Josh and I probably was in the same group, because our definitions more or less are similar in the sense that we came up with the idea of management being managing the peripheral elements, example, the resources that you need for the outcome desired as a leader or in the direction you want the leadership to go. So these are the things that we came up with as it relates to leadership and management.
That's great. And already we're seeing some of those links straight away with the group before talking about the resources, the management. So thank you very much for that,
Yes.
Hugh. That's great.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for being the spokesperson. Next group, we've got two more groups. Who've we got next? Who've we got? Oh, hang on. Is that Gary? Are you one of the spokesperson? Is it Gary?
Yes, I am.
Oh, lovely. Good to see you, Gary. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, great. That's
Okay,
good.
So basically we spoke briefly on leadership and management. We decided that both are similar in some forms. We say leadership is from taking control, leading from the top, setting examples. And management, however, is like basically running the day-to-day basics, making sure that everything is set and all goals are fulfilled, managing on a daily basis. So that's about it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much for that. Thanks, Gary. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And last, I think we're on to group number 5. Last but by no means least, who have I got for the spokesperson for the last group? I can't see anybody.
Glenda.
Oh, who am I at?
That's all right.
Hi, Glenda. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you.
So our group discussed both leadership and management,
Mm-hmm.
and we've come to the understanding that they have similar qualities, but we specify and we break down leadership to be its ability to influence, motivate, organize, and influence and encourage persons, right? So in whatever group or organization, and then we break it down to leadership in youth. So we say it's the ability to influence youth in a oh my gosh, and yes, to direct and influence youth in a manner that will be enabling them to empower them, and to, I don't understand what I have here, sorry. Let me take this over again.
Oh, you're okay.
So leadership in terms of youth development is the ability to influence, guide, and empower them into being individuals that can transform their lives and impact them in the society, okay?
Yeah.
And we said the roles and model, they can be role models. So a leader can be a role model, can be a mentor, can be somebody that you emulate and look up to, all right?
Yeah.
And
Perfect.
in terms of management, we came up with the idea that management is the ability to plan, conduct, and organize people, whether it be within an organization or group, and it's a skills that is used to get the job done. It directs, it controls, it guides persons into an organization or in an organization or group.
That is great. Thank you, Glenda, and thanks very much for being the spokesperson for your group. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so what we've got from just,
I think we've got Neil
we've got one
Francis
more.
to speak. Yeah, well,
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry, my apologies.
Is that right, Neil?
Neil?
Saying his group's missing.
Good morning.
Hi, Neil.
Just to start off on our group's discussion, when we heard leadership, we broke it down. So who leads? A leader. And a leader has various leadership styles. And we said that leadership is the act of guiding, directing, and inspiring his or her team to achieve a specific goal. Whereas management is the process of putting structure within an organization or group in order to get maximum results, no wastage, effectiveness, and efficiency. That is it.
That is great. Thank you for that. My apologies, I didn't see you in my in the corner. Have I missed?
You've got Deslin Douglas as well. As a
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Okay, hi everybody.
Deslin,
I don't know if y'all can see me. Hello?
Yes, I can see you. Hi, Deslin. Hi, lovely.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so our group, we agreed that both management and leadership goes hand in hand. To have good management skills, you need to also be a good leader. On the basis of leadership, we see it as someone who's been able to create a vision, being able to communicate tasks and able to have an effective results. And we also tied it in with teamwork. On the basis of management, the person on top who is working together and taking the lead to give out tasks and to get things done. But we also tied it in with teamwork because in order to have good management and being able to get things done, you must have teamwork. So that's what we agreed on.
Yeah, that is great. Thank you for that, Desmond. Thanks again for being the spokesperson. Have I missed anybody else out, Pete?
I think so. I think we've had feedback from all groups.
That is great. And I certainly think that what we're actually getting from some of those statements, so thank you very much everybody for taking that time to be in those groups and to have those discussions and to feedback, is certainly something that Pete is going to then explore in more detail around some of those similarities in regards to actually what is the difference between leadership and management, where does that cross over, but also perhaps looking at it saying, are we saying management is more, as what you've said there, more about the task orientated, some people said getting the job done, whereas with the leadership it's more about is it the influence, is it about that role model, you know, that person who will actually be that mentor and that guide, and really good to hear from some people about bringing in that youth element as well, thinking, well, actually, where does that then lead us when we talk about youth leadership as well? So it's very interesting in terms of how we've started to now explore those two different concepts. And what I would say is, please feel free to put any thoughts, anything that you'd like to say within the chat, and we can bring that up and have that discussion as we're progressing through, and certainly at the end. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass you over to Pete, and he's going to explore this in a little bit more detail, and I think that it will certainly bring up some of the conversations and some of the real rich narratives that you've explored already within your breakout group. So thank you for that, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for that. There's some really interesting words there around sort of mentorship and motivation and shared vision, and the word I particularly like, someone mentioned in the first group, is that word sort of transformation.
Yeah.
And I think we've kind of covered the three sort of main views of leadership in all of your feedback. But as this slide suggests, this chap John Adair, he's a bit of a guru of management books. His background is in the military, so a lot of what he writes about has that kind of sort of approach in it. But he says actually we don't need bosses, we need leaders. But he talks about that the orthodox view is basically that management is managing all of the resources of the business. I think someone mentioned that about managing stuff on the periphery, the building, maybe but actually, when we start working with young people or managing youth workers, actually it becomes more about leadership and about being a role model, and about having that shared vision. Quite interestingly, and I think one of the feedbacks was, if you're leading, what are you leading? And John Adair talks about, if you're a leader, or you're only a leader if you have followers. You only become a leader if people are prepared to follow you. Could I have the next slide, Debs? Yep. So one view is that there are actually distinct views of management, and then others where they actually overlap. Some authors would actually suggest that really management and leadership are one of the same. It just depends what lens you apply, what area of work, what area of youth work, what area of practice you apply. Often people talk about youth workers actually managing themselves, and as their career progresses, as they might actually sort of manage more staff, but then they begin to lead organisations. And you can see this interesting sort of overlapping circles where, again, John Adair talks about management is about sort of determining the need within youth work sector of young people and meeting outcomes and inputs, and basically managing the finances and the fundraising that you do is that's not particular leadership. That's kind of sort of managing the nuts and bolts of the organisation. Leadership at the other end is things like anticipating future impact. People were talking about, as I say, about transformation. They were talking about sort of visionaries. Again, when we start looking at further things, it's more about 5-year plans and 10-year plans, and people having the overview of where the organisation will be. What will it look like in 5 years' time? What will it look like in 10 years' time? But then the blue bit in the middle is kind of depending what lens you put on it. Could actually be management and or leadership around determining what constitutes good youth work. That might need managing, or that might need leading. Could I have the next slide, Debs? This over here we have an ex-youth worker turned author called Sandy Adirondack, and she wrote a book just about managing, because again, she wouldn't necessarily talk about leadership. She talks about it is just about managing in terms of youth work. And basically the inner circle is, in small organisations, youth workers or individuals might be the only employer. There's lots of voluntary sector organisations that only have one paid staff member, and the rest of the human resource is voluntary, either part-time or maybe even full-time. But if nothing else, we manage ourselves, and all workers are therefore responsible for self-management. And then as the next circle is, what do youth workers manage? Well, they manage the people who do the work, and we do the managing of the finances, we manage external relation, the partnership work, partnership working and multi-agency work is a key part of youth work practice back here in England. But then the outside, she does talk about strategic management. Other authors, and I think I kind of agree, strategic management lends itself more to the language of leadership, of transformation, of not only the organisations, but really we're into empowering young people. That is the transformation of young people. One of the analogies I often use is that with the young people we work with, I think a lot of the work is based on a deficit model. We only work with them because they have a problem. And it's almost as a society, sometimes as a profession, the image I have in my mind is, you can't nail wings onto a caterpillar to make it into a beautiful butterfly. The butterfly or the caterpillar has got to go through that transformation inside its pod and to emerge as this, or be transformed into a beautiful butterfly. And I suppose the analogy is, in terms of management and leadership, we need to try to stop nailing wings onto young people and creating what we want them to be, but enabling them to be transformed and empowered into their full potential. Next slide, please. And again, there is one school of thought that management and leadership are completely different. And this again is what John Ord writes about, where he will be saying that actually management is a clear set of knowledge, understanding and skills, whereas leadership is more about that visionary work. So the management, and again I think someone said it in the feedback, the management is the day-to-day, not trivia, but the day-to-day business of the organisation that you have to meet targets, whereas leadership is thinking forward. So it's quite interesting, again, sort of management relies on control, but leadership inspires trust, or a manager will accept the constraints of the organisation, will accept the weaknesses of the organisation, but actually a leader will challenge what they think is the issue and bring about social change in the organisation, rather than a manager having social control. Next slide, please.
Okay. So
no, it's back to you.
It's back to me, yes. So thank you for that, Pete. And I would hope that from the discussions that you had within your breakout groups, some of those three sort of models or approaches that Pete has explored with you gives you an idea of perhaps what the different constraints or the different similarities are between managers and leaders. So again, being youth workers, we've got a little bit of a quiz for you, a bit of a visual aid. I'm going to run through the names of these people, just in case you don't know who they are. So we've got Alice Ferguson, Adolf Hitler, Nelson Mandela, and obviously Queen Elizabeth II. And I just want you to do a bit of a poll very quickly, just to say, would you consider them to be managers or to be leaders? So you just need to press your polling to see what you would consider, whether they're a manager or whether they're a leader. So that's really interesting in terms of how people have actually voted, with regards to obviously to Alex Ferguson, who was obviously his name was actually the manager of Manchester United, probably one of the most successful managers, if not the. So 73% of you have obviously said that he is a manager, and 27% of the group have said that he's a leader. And I think if we take some of those descriptions in terms of what we say is a leader, looking at perhaps, around that being a role model, being somebody who mentors, being somebody who actually takes a team to a specific sort of goal or a vision, really. I suppose if you looked at that, you'd think, actually, was he a leader? But then at the same time, he had to manage those resources. He had to manage probably some very difficult footballers, probably worse still, maybe some very difficult agents as well. So it's interesting how we look at somebody or somebody's role and decide whether or not they are a leader within their profession, but at the same time they actually maybe are a manager of the assets that they have before them. Adolf Hitler is an unusual one to discuss. It's interesting how we've got 38% of people saying that he was classed as a manager, and then 62% in terms of being a leader. Now, one of the things that Lane mentioned in his presentation, and something that really struck a chord with me and resonates with us as professional youth workers in the UK, is around actually what underpins our practice. Now, for us as professional youth workers, we have something called the National Occupational Standards, which we adhere to in the United Kingdom. And two of those contributing factors are anti-discriminatory practice and participation practice. They underpin what we're all about, and about our ethics and about our values, which we try to obviously to stick to as professional youth workers. And it was very interesting that Lynn said there's a lot of similarities and synergy between yourselves and between us in terms of what we place as value. Now, unfortunately, what we're seeing, especially with Adolf Hitler, is actually you may be a good leader in terms of what you're leading, in terms of the people that are following you, but that doesn't mean that actually you're an ethical leader and about your values. So people will say, yes, he had a vision and he had a goal, but actually what that was certainly not ethical and was certainly not what we would class as value based. So what I'm trying to say is that not always is kind of leader be ethical in regards to that, and we can certainly see that in sometimes of business as well if we perceive things in different ways. Nelson Mandela always gets 100% in terms of a leader. He has a very strong vision. He had a very strong goal, and he was able to actually lead people to that. And some people, I suppose, who actually didn't want to be led and didn't agree with some things, but actually how he had that vision and that charisma to actually be able to do that and look at that certainly from a value base, from an ethical base, was something that embraced the majority of the whole of the world. And finally, I had to bring in Queen Elizabeth II, who as obviously as our current head of the Commonwealth. And I would probably say maybe it's a couple of years ago, perhaps Queen Elizabeth might have been seen more of as a leader. I certainly think at the moment, perhaps Queen Elizabeth II is certainly managing more assets in regards to things that are happening perhaps within her family, but also perhaps maybe within the context of obviously what's happening within the country. Certainly for us as a nation and from the Commonwealth in regards to the COVID-19, we were we looked at her as a leader of our country as well, to actually be able to support how we were all feeling currently at the moment. So it's interesting. Has somebody got their hand up that wanted to say something? Has anybody?
Yes.
You?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
a bit interesting. The photos of the persons that you posted sort of spark a question in my mind, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we're going to come to that during the point of the discussion. Where you have leaders being in charge of managers. So, for example, let's say a political hierarchy. You have the leader of the country, but then you have managers of the different sectors, and then you have a manager being in charge of leaders. So, for example, with the football with Sir Alex Ferguson, he's the manager of the club, but the captain leads the team on the field. So I don't know if that is a discussion that we're going to have. It's just well, these particular photos spark the question in my mind.
They do. They do, yeah, and that's really good in terms of obviously being able to say that, because actually I think that then leads on to further the discussion around actually are we too hung up on the actual the label of a manager or a leader, or is it actually more about the person and about what they're achieving? And that's why I was saying, although he manages, would you then see him actually, because as a leader in terms of perhaps not just Manchester United Football Club, but perhaps maybe it's football per se, in terms of actually having that role model, that mentor, that person that then perhaps supports other managers or other people within that setting.
And of course that was one of the best clashes ever between David Beckham and Alex Ferguson, where there was a difference in management styles or a difference in leadership styles. But yeah, it's an interesting point.
It is. Thank you for that. It's okay. So I'm just gonna. I think I just want to be able to move on. Okay, so back to you guys again. We're going to get you moving about again, and we're going to be putting you back into breakout rooms. Some of these things you have touched on, but we just want to be able to expand a little bit more. So in a minute, you're going to be asked to go back into breakout rooms for 10 minutes. And what I want us to now drill down to is actually looking at some of what we would class as the key skills and the key attributes of what makes a good manager, as opposed to also what are the key skills and attributes of what makes a good leader. So taking on board what we discussed first of all in the breakout rooms and what we've explored further here, I want you to actually be able to go back and please, if it's better, choose a different spokesperson, or if that person still feels comfortable doing that, then that's absolutely fine. But you're just going to go into breakout rooms now, and then we're going to actually then get you to come back. So we're going to give you about 10 minutes to discuss that. And please feel free to discuss the 4 pictures that we put up as well. That would be great. So you get that integrity, isn't it? And it goes back to what Monique said when your group, Monique, had discussed especially around Hitler, and about that that perceived perception that we have of him because of what he did, the atrocities, and that like clouds are actually looking about, but as a leader, did he achieve the vision that we wanted to, and did he have that visionary? But in terms of that integrity, that certainly wasn't there, was it, in terms of his leadership qualities. So it's interesting, isn't it, when we have those discussions and have those narratives about that. But thank you for that. That's really interesting. Thank you. Thank you for your for being spokesperson. Who have we got next?
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi, I'm sorry. A picture, or should I say my image is unavailable at present.
Okay, who am I talking to? Just so I know where am I at?
Lydia Achilles. Lydia
Hello.
Achilles.
Hi. Okay, do you want to start? That would be great, thank you.
Okay. Right, so my team and I have decided the key skills and attribute for a good manager would be that of communication, which plays a very important role, not only for both manager and leaders. Planning, decision-making, motivating, and coordinating. A very important point also that was brought forward is a manager should be versatile, someone who would be able to be flexible and maneuver different circumstances or situation. And in the case of being a good leader, the points that was brought forward was a leader who could build trust in others, be confident, inspire others to move forward, and also be creative and vision driven. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lydia. Thank you. Do we have one more?
Yes, I guess that's me now.
Is that Hugh?
Yes, it is.
Hi again.
All right. Yeah, we had a pretty in-depth discussion. And as discussed previously, there are a number of attributes and skills that would come under the general umbrella or under both sections, both for managers and leaders.
Yeah.
So I'll highlight those first, and then the others which we think are specific to the specific roles.
Please do, that would be great, thank you.
So for those we consider to be of both umbrellas, we have both parties should be critical thinkers, be able to motivate. They should have good communication skills, good problem solving skills, should be able to give some positive influence. And that one came kind of in the backdrop of things, and we often tend to forget that one. Cultural sensitivity, being able to deal with persons of varying cultural backgrounds and so on. So for the rest of the managerial skills and attributes, we had being able to monitor checks and balances, because you're in a managerial position, you're managing, so you have to be able to have those checks and balances. Though you're a manager, you're supposed to lead by example. You're supposed to provide the support for the persons that you're managing in whatever way you might think it is. Strategic planning, I guess that falls under the futuristic view of what it is you're dealing with. So we had those for the managers. The rest for the leaders would fall under the following. We have the transformational aspect of it, being able to create that change. The leader is supposed to be that reflective person, a person who would be able to sit back and look at what has been done and see what changes probably could be made. You're supposed to be a mentor. You're supposed to have that sense of responsibility. You're supposed to give a level of affirmation. The discussion around that was oftentimes we tend to look at the negative that happened and not commend the positives that happened. So affirming in persons, yes, you would have done a good job. You're supposed to be able to empower, inspire, have that sense of caring. Also, you're supposed to be able to function on different levels, as we would call it. You're supposed to be down to earth. You're supposed to come down on the levels that you need as a leader to express all those attributes and skills. If you're not on the level, then it will be very difficult for you to be able to express those attributes and skills. So these are the things that we would have discussed and come up with.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have I missed anybody out? Have we got?
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Yes. Melandra Wilson here. Can you hear me?
I can just hear you. You're quite faint.
Hi. Can you hear me better now?
I can hear you better now. Yes, I can. Yeah.
So our group decided that the skills that we listed would be both for a leader and a manager, but we have about 5 of them that specifically for a manager. We have planning skills, personable in that your team needs to be able to feel free to approach you, and we have assertive and reliable. And the others would fall under both umbrellas. We have communication skills, empathy, honesty, role model, committed, mediator, patience, problem solver, good decision-making skills, confident, and we have a reflector. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Melandra. That's great. Is that everybody? Have I missed anybody out?
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
So that's really interesting in terms of how we have some very similarities in terms of about how we are describing some of the key skills and the attributes of a manager and a leader, and probably more important about perhaps where there is some real common sort of narratives as well around it. But one of the questions that I'd probably like you to be able to think about as a group, and I mean, feel free, we've got a few minutes if anybody wants to dip in when I pose this question, is actually, do our youth services across the Commonwealth, do they need leading, or actually do they need managing? Or is that a question that perhaps needs asking? And whether or not having the opportunity to actually explore what is the difference between a leader and a manager, and perhaps looking at some of those similarities, is that something that we can consider, and certainly for yourselves can consider as we're moving forward to develop, especially for yourselves, and looking at making a youth worker a professional qualification? I don't know if anybody wants to dip into that at all. I'm open for people to unmute themselves and see what they say, what they'd like. Any comments?
Glenda here, Grenada.
Hi, Glenda.
Yes, I do believe that the youth in our island or in the region, we need some form of leadership and management. So we need both, and I'll explain why. In management, you direct projects and programs, right? And leadership quality is a support given to persons that would be out there working with the youths and stuff like that. So we need both of them, and they're for different reasons, because you must have somebody that's at the helm of the project or the helm of the department that is going to give guidance and give direction or follow the protocol and the policies and the program that are laid out before us. And in terms of leadership, we're talking about support to youth workers, support to youths that are below the youth workers, and we're talking about support even to the programs and the projects that we're also doing. So we need both leadership and managers, and there's a different characteristic of both of them, and we need to be guided by that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Anybody else before we move on to the next part? Anybody else? Hi. Hi, Monique.
Hi, Deborah. I was just saying that maybe we see things differently, but I think that we do need management and leaders need to work together.
Yeah.
But I still think that the manager that possesses greater leadership skills will be more effective. The traditional, like in youth work, I think persons need to be dynamic, they need to be versatile, because our role requires so much more than the norm. And I think to work with young people, as a manager, the traditional skill set for a manager in youth work cannot exist. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
I think that in youth work, being a leader, what we do in terms of empathy, in terms of motivating, in terms of being creative, because it can be monotonous, it can be stagnant. I think that those things, I think in ours for youth work, we need great leaders, not great managers.
Okay, that's interesting. And I think something that, just picking up from that, Monique, and I think a couple of your colleagues mentioned around the groups was around that. I think somebody said it was empathy. Someone said about, I think it might have been Hugh that mentioned about, down to earth. And yeah, and something that what we say now, and specifically in England, and I'm doing a study on what we call lived experiences, and whether or not there is a correlation between what or do we provide better, of want of a better word, better services to young people and to perhaps adults in particular. I'm looking at young people and adults in recovery of substance misuse, drugs and alcohol, and are they better served by actually having those mentors, those peer mentors, those leaders who have already been through similar sort of experiences. So therefore you have that empathy, but also perhaps you have a greater skill set because you have a better understanding, perhaps, whether that's to manage your team or to be able to manage and to work alongside young people. So it's really interesting how we do have some similarities in how we are thinking and how we're approaching this. So that's really interesting. Hugh's just raised his hand. Is that right?
I think Glenda had given a thumbs up.
Glenda, unfortunately, we're not allowed to unmute people because of your human rights. You have to unmute yourself because we don't want to put you in that situation of making you talk. So we need to be really, really careful.
He's not allowed to. I've just let him, so he should be
all
able
right. Have we got Hugh, or did we have somebody else?
Okay. All right. Yes.
Hi.
Hello?
Hi.
Is it Maudlin or is it Hugh? Sorry.
It's Maudlin.
Hi, Maudlin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then I'll come back to you, Hugh. Thank you.
Okay, I tend to agree with Monique a bit. As a youth worker, we need to be good leaders, because it depends on how your organizations is structured too. Because if you talk about youth work, you would get the leaders more involved with the youth. The managers take care of the day-to-day operations of the department, whereas you, as the youth worker, the youths look up to you for good leadership. You know, for what you can offer to them, instead of just doing the day-to-day management. The sensitivity, the ability you have to inspire these persons. If you say in Grenadian terms that you are on the ground with them, so it tend to be better leaders to be working along with the youth.
Okay, thank you for that. That's great. Thank you. Hugh, did you want to say something?
Yes. Well, in agreement with everybody, but I'll just add this. From my perspective and the context in which I work, I think what we really need is better managers. Now, I say this in the context of most of the youths that we work with, and I guess my context show the region, most of us have been at that level at some point in time. So being able to work with them comes easy. Being able to lead them comes easy because we know what it is some of them are going through. We've been there, as I've said. However, what makes it difficult, and I guess that is where the leaders are sometimes overshadowed and not seen, is that there isn't adequate management of the resources that we need, or there isn't anybody to manage those resources so we can get the outcome that we desire as leaders. So it's not a shortage of leadership per se, but it's, in my view, more so that of management and managing the resources that we need, because it's not that difficult to, let's say, for example, you have a reformed gang member who has taken a leadership role to lead some of the youths out of that situation. Now, it would be difficult for him to garner the resources, manage those resources, and still do the leadership part of it. So I think, the leaders are there. We can find them. They're there. But it's more so the managing of the, like I said earlier, the peripheral elements that needs to be there for effective impact and outcomes. So I think management is what we need. Okay. And not my thing is not just somebody sitting in an office. Like in our prior discussion, there was somebody made the point about a boss, and I said a boss and a manager is two different persons, right? A boss is the kind that, you know, deals with it heavy-handedly. What I say goes, and that's that. Whereby the manager would have that vision, that outcome for what it is we're supposed to be doing. So my view on it is we need more managing than leadership. Leadership is easy to find. It's very easy to find.
Thank you for that, Hugh. That's good. And actually that will lead us on to, at the end of this presentation, just some key questions for you to take away and to talk through with your colleagues within which the environment within which you work. So I'm going to just move on now to pass over to Pete. And Pete can start talking you through the different styles of leadership and management. I'm okay to pass you over, Pete?
Yeah, we've had a few people had to leave because they've got to go to work. So
okay.
All right,
okay.
So I'll be briefer than I might have been, if that's okay. But again, so, you know, we over the last hour we've tried to explore and look at the complexities really in the different viewpoints of leadership and management and the overlaps and things. But the kind of the classic sort of there are authors that write about there are particular styles of leadership, and again the words we've used today, things like the visionary one, the democratic one, the coaching one, the affiliative leader, which I can't often say, which is what Goldman writes about is bringing harmony to organisations, of making sure that the staff actually form sort of collaborative ways of working. Commanding is as it sounds, but really what often the debate around management leadership, and we've slightly done it today, or provoked a debate about polarizing about, are we leaders, are we managers? And I think lots of people have fed back, actually we do need managers and we do need leaders. And actually, it's not about a particular style. What Goldman writes about is we all might have preferences of how we lead or how we manage, but actually the real skill of a good leader, a experienced leader, is to deploy elements of all of the leadership styles. And really the trick is to be able to identify, have a toolbox, the youth workers toolbox full of different leadership styles and different management styles, and the skill, the professional artistry of the professional youth worker is to know which style to take out of the toolbox to either manage or lead a particular issue or organisation. Can I have the next slide, Debs? Thank you. There's a sort of very old models, sort of Lewin from 1939 is kind of the classic sort of model that people talk about. And again, it's often misunderstood. People kind of think, well, autocratic management is actually a bad way. We don't like managers or leaders who are very autocratic and dictatorial and tell us how to do. But actually sometimes organisations or situations need quite autocratic decisions making. And again, like being a democratic management style, a lot of youth workers back here like to say, well, I run a democratic team. Everyone participates in all of the decision making. I don't think that's always true, because sometimes people look to the manager or to the leader to make autocratic decisions, and that's often a good thing. Again, consultative has the positive side. People feel valued, people feel their opinions have been listened to. But the problem with being a consultative manager is often the whole process can take twice as long because you're consulting with everyone. Where do you stop? And again, laissez-faire often feels attractive to some youth workers who would kind of feel it's really nice that my manager doesn't micromanage me and leaves me to my own devices. But the flip side of that with the laissez-faire style is actually some workers feel abandoned, that they have no guidance, that they have no leadership. And again, the skill of the manager, the skill of the leader is to decide which staff, normally a new member of staff, maybe an inexperienced member of staff, It's not a good style of management to be laissez-faire. You might need to be a bit more autocratic, a bit more directional or prescriptive in the things that they do. Can I have the next slide? Again, I think a model, going back to John Adair, that is kind of a good place to end. And I think Monique, I actually mentioned this, is so you know, we need managers, we need leaders, but actually we need very skilled senior staff member within our youth services who really get it, because basically what management and or leadership is about is you have to manage the task, you have to manage your team, and you have to manage the individuals. There is no point in having a team that gets on really, really well and enjoys socializing together if you don't achieve the task. And it's if the individual's needs are continually being met, but the team isn't, then actually maybe you haven't got a team that can work towards the task, and the organizational vision is never met. So I think that's a good bit of theory to end on before we move on to your next slide, Debs.
I'll unmute myself. The final slide that we have, and this is for something, these are questions actually for you to take away really, is one of the main questions is about, you know, do you want to train your workforce to be good managers or develop leaders for the future, or is that both? What are you currently doing in terms of management and leadership progression? And I'm saying that you collectively, as in, you know, you may be a manager yourself, you may be a leader, or you may be part of an organisation. So what is it that you're doing in terms of management and leadership progression? And that's both for your staff, your volunteers, and obviously your young people. One of the terminology that we use quite a lot is actually, what does good look like? If we have a vision of actually this is where we want to get to, and that's working alongside actually what our theory of change is really, is what does good look like? What does good look like in terms of a youth provision for Grenada and obviously other areas who've come onto this call today, possibly in terms of leadership and management, and what is that goal? And I think somebody mentioned before in terms of those assets, and particularly around what a manager's job is to bring in those assets to allow us to do that job. But I suppose, what do we need as a community and as an individual to actually achieve this goal? You know, so what do we need to actually be able to get on with the task in hand really, and to be able to do that? Just get the next slide up. Oh, it's just gone. So yeah, so maybe it's for you to go back to your organisations and within your collective of your team to actually start thinking about, how do we actually achieve this goal and how do we get to that point? Okay, so we've come to the end. Thank you very much for your patience. I know we've run over a little bit of time, but I think that was a lot of that was the great enthusiasm in the discussions that we had. We never want to not enable our colleagues and especially youth workers to talk. I think it's so important. But does anybody have any questions that they would like to unmute and ask? One of the things I would just point out, the evaluation, which I've been asked just to reiterate, has actually gone into the chat, and we'd really appreciate if we can give you some time to be able to do that evaluation. That's really important for us to develop these ongoing sessions. But does anybody have any questions?